All right. All right. Welcome everyone to another webinar here. And today I have a great guest with us. It's Dr. Joseph Lee and Danya from Normandy Lake Dentistry down in Jacksonville, Florida. We've been working together for over 5 years now. I
Mhm.
just, yeah,
Yeah.
when I think about this morning, 5 years. And so they are an incredible practice. It's been like pretty cool to see them transform from when I started working with them until where they are now. And so I brought them on today because I thought it'd be a good example of a multi-location practice where you have an owner, a COO role type person, and just to talk a little bit about their systems and their strategic ways that they grow the practices, and some of the interesting things for for in the practice owners that are in Florida know this. Florida is a little bit of a different market, and so
Mhm.
just to be able to attract the right patients in the door, it's difficult, compared to like the practices in Kansas, Nebraska, Colorado. It's a little bit different ballgame. So I want to just share a little bit about their practice and what they do. So they have four locations in the Jacksonville area. Last year did around 7.5 million in revenue out of all locations. The fourth location just got added, so that's not really that 7.5 million isn't representative of that fourth location fully of what it's capable of doing. Saw over 17,000 patients last year. 14 doctors, 10 GP, and four specialists of all the different locations. And so pretty big practice in the area. The other thing too is extremely nice. Like I've had a chance to go down and see their offices. It's pretty like next level of the office. Dr. Lee will credit his wife for her design taste in that, and it's pretty nice. Like their flagship locations, Normandy and then Lakewood, are just pretty amazing. And so I think that's a big credit of why they think they're successful as well is just the effort they put into the atmosphere and the patient experience. So
Mhm.
welcome, Dr. Lee and Danya.
Thank you.
For having
So
us.
yeah. So as we get started here, I think I want to start with the to kind of give a preference or I guess no, a reference of where we were when we started with them. They were a practice that was running. They were running some more aggressive specials at the time,
Mhm.
and that's something that when we went in, I was like, I'm not a big specials fan, so we eliminated that. But the new patient flow went down, but the production per patient went up, and I think that became more the patients that are coming in became more representative of I think the experience that you offer rather than being a special driven practice. You focused on the quality and the care and the experience. You do still run some specials, but nothing like before. So my question is, do you want to give any background to that of when you were running specials versus not running specials, and kind of how do you think that changed the practice?
I'll start if you don't mind.
Say,
Uh,
yeah.
so what I've noticed is, obviously marketing, works. I mean, marketing works, but you have to be, but you have to. What I find is that, if you're not specific on what you're targeting in terms
Mhm.
of what your audience is going to be and what kind of patients you want, I think, you could drive anyone in the door. You just have to, but without thought, without the I should say the intention of bringing in a specific type of patient, you lose a lot because if you drive a lot of patients in, what I've noticed is like, and I've done this before. I mean, I've made every single mistake along the way. I've done all sorts of marketing, and I've even done mailer, which is like this discount magazine in there. And what I've noticed is that we could drive the numbers up, but what happens is that you have a lot of patients that you just don't move forward with treatment. And
Mhm.
what ends up happening is that you hire all this team and all this to go and handle the increased workload,
Mhm.
but they're accepting less, and the patients aren't not moving forward. And what happens is that your overhead starts to go ahead and go up significantly because you have all these people, all these team members handling a lot of flow, but there's not a lot of, for a lack of a better word, bang for the buck. And it may seem very, very busy, but in the end, it's a lot of headache and a lot of just running around and spinning your wheels. With tweaking the marketing and making it more intentional about, hey, we want a particular type of patient. We want a patient that, and for us, we want one that's going to go ahead and add value to our practice. And that's what Ryan, we've started tweaking that and taking some of the specials out of there, like the free this or free that. I think what we've seen is the revenue for each patient that came in, for each new patient came in, start to increase. And so we had, but for a lot, I'm not saying that the other people don't have quality, but in terms of bringing value and better efficiencies in our practice, the tweak in marketing certainly makes a huge difference.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just to add to that, I'll just say, after COVID, there was definitely a lot of adjustments that had to be made. And so I think that's where that thought process came in is that we just wanted a lot of opportunity for the team to be able to maximize. And what we realized is that when you have fewer people, the quality of the patients that you're treating is definitely a key factor to ensure that we're maximizing the opportunities, one, but two, that the quality of the patients that we have to present to the providers, they're able to afford the treatment, that we have to offer. And when you have specials that everything's free, a lot of times the patients don't have the means to be able to move forward with treatment. And so it's taking up valuable chair time and things like that we just wanted to be able to maximize for our providers. And so taking away those specials increased the quality of the patients that we have, even though the quantity of patients did decrease. So
Yeah. And I started with that question because how you answered exactly, what I was expecting, because the one thing that they do as a practice that is extraordinary is the tracking of numbers and using them. So when you have numbers, you can have this overload of information and you don't really know what to do with it. You create
right.
spreadsheets after spreadsheets and you're not really sure. And in fact, what it does is it becomes like this decision point where you're not really sure what to look at. You make wrong decisions. And so you got to be strategic on what you're tracking and why. And so they have a spreadsheet. I'm not going to ask them to share this spreadsheet, but they have another one I'll share later, have them share, but one that tracks every location of the practice and it goes through. And so when I get on a call with them, we go through this spreadsheet and we look at key KPIs on there that tell us how things are doing. And so when we're talking about the specials and versus not specials and quality of patients versus quantity, that's something that can be shown in the numbers. And so when they look at these spreadsheets, they're making decisions that are off of real data that I think really plays a factor in how successful they are. And so I think that's a key in running a successful practice is using the right numbers to make the right decisions.
Mm-hmm.
And so like one example of that is they look at every single week, we look at the number of calls that come in and the conversion percentage of those calls. And then it kind of funnels down. It starts with that. If they're not getting calls, number one, they're not going to
Right.
get new patients. If they're not converting those, they're not going to get new patients. Then once they do convert them, how much is that production worth? How is the treatment planning? So it starts at the very top there. Can you tell me a little bit about, let's start with that call conversion piece of it. How do you track the call conversions? Because that's something that we get asked a lot.
Mm-hmm. So we've
Um,
adjusted that over time. Sorry, Dr. Lee. We've adjusted that, and I feel like we've refined it to make it better. And so as of recently, we did create a spreadsheet for scoring our calls. And so I've had to increase the amount of people. I had one person, now I have two people that oversee that. And so every single call that comes through, we have used Mango. So Mango records all the calls. And so these individuals go in, they listen to every single call, they grade them on the criteria that we have, the greeting of the call. Did they, offer the savings plan if the patient didn't have insurance? And then ultimately, did they end up on the schedule? Those are a few areas that we grade. And so the conversion is based off of new patients specifically, we also do recare. But on the new patient side, if there was a patient that called in, did they end up having an appointment? Yes or no? Simple. And the goal is to get to 85% conversions based off of that data. But what it also provides is the ability to be able to provide feedback to the individuals that you have on your team answering the calls in real time, to where they're getting the information to say, hey, let's go back and listen to the call that we had as to why this patient did not schedule, so that we're able to offer feedback as to how we would have scripted the call in a different way to maybe have a different effect to where the patient actually did end up on the schedule. And so it's definitely helped refine with our team the quality of call that the patient is having when they're calling in, and knowing that that is our lifeline. And so when we talk about patient experience, it's not just when they're in office, but it's also when they're calling in, and knowing that, you know, when you're answering that call, that the patient can feel that you're smiling. That's important, because it's not just about converting the call, but it's also, again, when we talk about that quality, what is the quality of the call that is happening when the guest relations individual is actually converting that call, whether it be that they didn't schedule or they did. Was it a good call overall? You know, were they smiling through the call? Were they asking the right questions to actually get the patient to convert? Were they rude? You know, did they have the right greeting? Did they have the right farewell on the call, and things like that? So we grade different areas to have a better idea of not just the conversion, but also the quality of the call as well.
I probably would add that we've tried many different systems before, and I probably won't go ahead and name all of them in terms of call scoring or call tracking. I mean, we've used a handful that claim AI will go ahead and be able to read the calls, and unfortunately, been disappointed just because a lot of times it wasn't accurate, or for whatever reason it wasn't counting this or that. It just wasn't exactly right. So we've kind of continued working at that until we found a reliable solution. And that
Right.
really, it comes down to right now we do have people, live people who go in there and listen to these calls and score them according to a rubric that we have. And as well as, like Danya alluded to, is we also record whether the patient's scheduled or not. And you know, phones, and obviously, I think you've had countless people come on on your show and go over the importance of phone calls, and it's just are you answering the phones, or are you converting them? Because that could be a serious funnel for, or what I like to think is a limiting rate limiting step in ultimately how well the office performs.
Right.
Yeah, 100%. That's one of the biggest issues I think is call answer rate and call conversions. That's we hit that over and over with practice we work with. I did, and I think this is a good example too of the way you both answered the question is, Donnie went into the details of it, and Dr. Lee talked about it from a little bit higher viewpoint. And this is something that I see that I would say if anybody has a position like this set up in their office with like an owner and then like a implementer in the company of the operations, Dr. Lee and Donnie do a phenomenal job of that. So when we're on a call, just to give an example, we'll go through a number and Dr. Lee will say, Danya, why is, the conversion rate 62%? What's going on there? And Danya can answer the question or say, I will figure that out and we will correct that. And so I think and this might not be relevant to like smaller practices, but I think you can take pieces out of this that is relevant. So, when you get to a situation like this, you have to have a CEO that's running the company, and that's Dr. Lee, and then Donnie, who's implementing these, systems and
Systems.
looking
Yeah.
at the numbers to ensure that they're meeting their goals. But you can take this even on a small practice. One doctor practice has an office manager. The same thing. Let's make sure that the right people are looking at the right data and people
Mhm.
making decisions off of those and implementing those. I think is key. And I will look at even like for example with my company is I don't know all the details of the operations. I know the higher level. I know what the vision is and I know what the goal is, but asking the right people the right questions is important, and they do a very good job of that. Of every call of it's really interesting. You probably don't even recognize it when you're on the calls, but like yeah, doctor will be like, Donnie, what's that number? Why is that? Why is that? And then Donnie typically almost 100% of the time will either know an answer and explain
Yeah.
why it is, but what she's doing. And often I've already talk to them about this. And so it's pretty interesting to kind of see that in action. And I would
Mhm.
recommend if you have a setup, even like, a larger office, one location office, having the right people in place like this is important. And allowing yourself, even if you're a one doctor practice and you're in the chair 4 days a week and you have 2 hours a week to do CEO time, I think that's important. Whereas Dr. Lee might have a lot more time to do CEO time because he has to. Um, yeah, moving to, I guess, another topic here would be when we look at some data in the spreadsheets that you do, can you give us or give some examples of like what would be the main KPIs that you both look at? And they may be different depending on since you're
Mhm.
in different roles. But yeah,
Yeah.
tell us like the KPIs that you look at. So I to start with Dr. Lee because I want to start at the high level and then I want to see what
Mhm. Sure.
Donnie does operationally.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, that was a great way to put it. You have high level KPIs, and then there's sub metrics that will support those. Because just because you look at the one KPI, it tells you there's a problem in that area. You do really need to go ahead and look at the sub KPIs to see exactly where, and I think a lack of a better way to put it, like, and who in that entire process, where what job's not being done, in other words. So when I look at a practice at a high level, there's certain what I call rate limiting steps. In biochemistry, there's something called rate limiting steps, and that's like if you have when you have a reaction, the reaction only continues until it uses up the I guess the what the rate limiting step is the last chemical that once it gets used up, the reaction stops, right? So in the practice, in our I guess, dental practice, what the first thing that we look at, and it's not necessarily the first thing that you just, but marketing spend drives leads, right? People call. It doesn't drive conversion, it just drives people calling in. So that's the first thing we look at. It's like, are we doing enough outflow or marketing to go ahead and drive leads in? The next step, the next I guess the next step in terms of rate limiting step is answer rate. Uh, are we answering the phone? And if your team is sleeping on a job, or they're too busy, there's not enough people answering phones, that can significantly bottleneck your entire practice.
Mhm.
The next one is then phone conversion, because if they're answering the phone now, how well are they at getting that patient to go ahead and schedule an appointment? After that, once you get an exam on there, once the patient comes in and there's an exam on there, then it's really up to the doctor to go ahead and plan, treatment plan something, right? That's going to be, if they don't treatment plan anything, you're not going to produce anything out of it. If they treatment plan a lot, that raises the bar, raises the potential for what can be done. And so that leads us to our next step, and that's treatment acceptance. So from what you plan, how much is accepted, right? Because you're not going to do any more than what's accepted. So each one is just, if you imagine it, each one's just another constrictor, and it keeps on going down until we get to the bottom. But after acceptance, then it's what can you produce or what can you produce per exam. So from there, it could be affected. That could be affected by many things, like the clinical efficiency, how your team is scheduling. If there's going to be a huge difference between a practice where the team is scheduling 4 hours for a crown versus a team that schedules 1 hour for a crown, or a doctor who could go ahead and do a crown in 1 hour versus he needs 2 hours for a crown. So that would determine production per exam. And then ultimately, then everybody knows this collections. How much do you collect from the production that you did, and there's a percentage there. And ultimately, that all leads to, well, how much revenue are you going to go ahead and produce from original, when you start from marketing spend, answer rate, phone conversion, treatment planned amount, treatment accepted amount, production, and then ultimately collections. those are all what I call the rate limiting steps, and the biggest things that you have to go ahead and raise up in order to go and affect anything. And I think, I'll let Donnie dive into it, but each of those steps are supported by different sub-metrics. Are you
Mhm.
doing this? Doing this? Are you
Right.
doing this? And how do you measure those things? But anyway, I'll let Donnie take it away here.
Well, I guess everything that I look at is already high level because everything that you said would have been what my answer was as well. However, in order to achieve those high level metrics, to get the results that you ultimately want to impact the practice, it starts with people, right? Like you have to have the right people in order to be able to have the effect that you want, for the doctor to be able to produce per hour or to even get the accepted. Because if you don't have the right person greeting the person from hello, all of that's lost. So finding the right people in the right positions is definitely something that I focus on, probably primarily in the practice. I am viewed typically as the gatekeeper. Everybody has to come through me first to see, is this the right individual that we can add into the right department to give us a positive effect, whether it be a greeter at the front desk all the way to the dentist. Even finding the right providers is definitely a key factor of continuing to grow our practices. If we don't have the right people doing the right things, all the things that we work on won't come together. When we have these conversations, even with our providers, when we have doctors that are 10x providers and they're producing, over $100,000 a month, it is imperative that we inform them, if they don't already know, which most of them do, that you didn't do it alone. You had the support of great team members, from the front desk, from answering the phones to the assistant to the treatment coordinator to the office manager, that collectively worked to drive these metrics.
And to add to that, I think just a question for you, Danya. What are some of the things that we do to make sure we have the right
Mhm.
people?
Yeah.
Mhm.
What are the things that we do before? What are the things that we do, while they're there? I mean, I
Yeah.
think that your office managers evaluating the performance of each of each of our team members and ensure they're A, B, or C players and stuff like that. I think that'd be.
Yeah. So, prior to COVID, I would say COVID did do us a solid in just teaching us a valuable lesson about the importance of people that you have. A lot of times before COVID, we would hire for skill. What could they bring to the table? How many years of experience of dentistry do they have that they can offer? And what we discovered post COVID is that we hire nice people, you know, because you can't change who somebody is. They are who they are by the time they come to us, but we can give them skills that they may not already possess. We just can't change their personality. We can't change whether they're a nice person or not. And so we hire for nice first. I will say that, it's how do they engage when they come in for the interview? How are their body language, things like that. We get a good read for that. And then we place them with our team. We want our team to have just as much say so on the decision of, hey, how did you feel about this person when they were shadowing with you? And that ultimately does play a role in the decision on whether they come on board. But then once they're implemented into our group, knowing how our systems are is vitally important, and being able to train them on their systems is through, training manuals that we have, one-on-one training, but then also in addition to that, getting instant feedback, which that's something that we've incorporated into the practice that has been definitely beneficial. All of our team members get grades, and it's for themselves. It's not something that's sent to Dr. Lee or I to, see, oh, did you get an A, B, C, or D, F today? It's for them. If they are a hygienist and every day that they're putting their metrics into the spreadsheet, they're seeing an F, 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 they don't like that. And so they want to know, how do I change this? So they're going to their office managers and they're having these instant conversations of saying, hey, I failed today and I'm looking at my numbers and I don't know why that happened. Can you help? Or, wow, I got an A today. I rocked it out. How can I replicate this moving forward? And it's tangible data that they see in real time, and they don't have to wait on a manager to sit down and have a one-on-one with them to tell them, hey, you're doing awesome right now, or hey, you're really sucking. Instead, they're getting that every single day to know how they performed. And if you ran around like a chicken with your head cut off all day and then you run your metrics and you failed, we don't want to repeat those days. We want to figure out, okay, what happened that I can put in to prevent that? Did I prepare properly? Did I chart prep? Were those the things that got in my way? And if it was, let's correct it tomorrow, not a month or 90 days or a year from now. Let's do it tomorrow. So I feel like that's definitely had a huge impact on the business, and just having the right people that want that information because they want to do a good job.
Yeah,
Very
I would
true.
take two things from that I think are very to stick out to me is first of all, again, if you listen through the conversation, referring back to metrics and looking at a system, that's something to take away. I don't care how big of a business you are or practice you are. Looking at those numbers is important, and using them to make those decisions is big. And then the other thing I took out of it was the nice comment of hiring people that are nice.
Mm-hmm.
That's a very I'll expand a little bit beyond that is you are 100% right with what you were saying with that. Nice people, you can't train nice.
Mm-mm.
So two examples of that is, when I worked for the Walt Disney Company at Disney World, they used to have um, this long hallways building called casting where you'd go to apply. This is back, they probably don't do this anymore, but in this long hallway, and there's a desk at the end of the hallway. You have to walk uphill. Um, and they would say that the reason why this was set up was because then the people at the front, when someone was walking up, could see if they were smiling, and their eye contact as they walked up this hallway to initially find out right off the bat, check mark, do they do eye contact and are they smiling?
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
so that tells them right off the bat, okay, this person they smile. That's important for us as a company.
Yeah.
Another thing too to take away from that is another Disney example is um, so when it comes, you can actually measure how much revenue Nice will bring to you. Like that sounds crazy. I guess it's Disney and outside of Disney. I know a company that measured surveys off of bathrooms and off of people. So when you go to those bathrooms, those little smiley faces that you clicked in the bathrooms, that's actually a measurable piece of it. And so I'm just trying to show that hiring nice people and the decisions they made on this can lead to additional revenue is
Mm-hmm.
because if you're in areas one that are cleaner, people spend more money. That's been proven. But also when people are nicer, they will spend more money. And so in the dental world, we're not looking at trying to, you're shopping, but you're accepting treatment. And
Right.
if people are nice, you're going to through the whole process of the value chain from the time they answer the call until the time that they leave, you need to ensure that they come back for an appointment if there's another appointment. So that whole value chain will, if it's set up correctly, will lead to more revenue. So I think
Right.
that those are two good takeaways is hire nice
And
people. I 100% agree with that.
you're absolutely right. Google actually did a study inside their own company to go ahead and determine what are the most productive teams, and so they even looked at all the other traditional measures of personality tests to how you put teams together. I think was that Earl Meyer? Gosh, there's a lot of personality tests
Yeah.
and create better teams, and they took all the variables of team making and they tested them, and what they found was that empathetic people
Mm-hmm.
with high empathy make the best team members and were actually the most productive.
Mm-hmm.
And it was interesting. We actually employ this test, the test that they use to go ahead and measure empathy in when we're hiring. We actually have them take a little test that Google uses. It's kind of like it's the best way to explain it is that you can see the eyes only of a person, and you're supposed to go ahead and be able to tell
The emotion.
what they're feeling.
Uh,
What are they angry? Are they happy? Are they, you're supposed to be able to tell that. And so we have this. It has about I think 20 photos of eyes, and we have every person who comes aboard takes something like that, and we have several other tests that we do just to go ahead and get an idea who are we hiring? Do they have high empathy? Do they not? And that goes into the mix. I know, and again, that's just another measure that we
Right.
use that's going to go ahead and help us make sure we hire the right
Right
people
people.
as Danya had referred, that's such a huge part. You can have all the best systems in the world, but if you got the wrong people on the bus, it's not going to go ahead and
Doesn't
work.
make a difference. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I talk about that all the time to have the right people on the bus. I think that's very important.
Mhm.
Um, will you bring up, I think this is a good transition to um, bring up that scorecard that share the screen here, because this is going to go back to the KPI metrics, which we're going to
Mhm.
go back and look at a higher view here, and then I think kind of go into the weeds after this.
Yeah, I can.
Um,
You want
yeah,
me
so
to
this
share?
is an interesting. Dr. Lee showed this to me. When I saw this, I was like, this is freaking brilliant. Like, this is a really good spreadsheet here. And he talked about this earlier when it came to his metrics. And so this is the analysis going through 7 steps there to looking at basically these KPIs. So I'll let Dr. Lee go ahead and explain this. Don, anything that you have to add too, just explain
Yep.
this because this is I don't care if you are a one doctor practice doing $500,000 in revenue or
Right.
a 7 location, $30 million practice. This is good. So go ahead and break this down.
Yeah, absolutely. I created this document so that it can really illustrate to our managers the impact that each step has. If you fail at a step, it could go ahead and completely derail all your efforts. So by plugging in different numbers or amounts or what have you, you could go ahead and see the net effect. And I did present to doctors, so I wanted to also let the doctors know why each step is important and how that might ultimately affect their compensation. So it's all the way down there.
Mhm.
I believe in making sure everybody understands why it's important to them. I think was it Dale Carnegie once mentioned people are only interested in what's in it for
In
me.
it for me, yes.
Yeah, it's true.
So anyway, to start, if you were to go ahead and look at I think a good way to do it, and let's say everything is perfect, right? You're going down and you're doing everything perfect, but you decide, and I decide, hey, I don't want to spend as much money on marketing anymore, right? you know what? We don't need to spend that much on marketing, and I'll say, let's go ahead and I go ahead and say, I'm going to spend half the amount instead of spending 30,000. I'm going to spend 15,000. Well, if you look at what that happens is that I spend 15,000 instead, that's going to drive my number of leads will drop down to, well, obviously half. And what that's going to do is it's going to half the amount of uh, collections or productivity we're going to have. The doctor, the amount you're going to go ahead, so you just cut that amount in half, and it's huge. And you can see that any step of the process, if I suddenly your call rate, if your answer rate in office is half, it goes in half, that's going to be huge. Like say, instead, let's say we're just going to, or our answer rate drops to 50%. You know, we lost Susie's sick or Sally's sick, and then suddenly she's not answering the phones that day. We only have half the team answering the phones. Again, you could see that if you look, it was at 92, or let's say collections were at 309,000. I'm sorry. Some of these are going to be bigger just because, and this is only new patient income. But you can see that the moment your answer rate goes 50%, your production is going to go in half. So each of these steps are very, very critical. And anytime any of these adjustments at any step, it's going to go ahead and have a huge impact. And so obviously in most offices, there's a lot of little areas where it starts to go down. You're not perfect in all of them. So I think let's go ahead and do industry average. So industry average, let's say an office spends about $6,000. This is just a solo doc, right? $6,000 on marketing spend. Would you say that, Ryan, how much do you think a solo doc spends on?
Well, like an average practice spends, um, like a solo doctor is going to spend probably around three thousand a month.
Let's say let's say $3,000 a month. That's good. That's good.
Mm.
Let's say what's the average answer rate in I
Mm.
think it's
I had that.
7%. Like
The last time I looked, last month, out of all the data we collected was 68%.
Ooh, ouch.
68%. So
Yeah,
answer
it was
rate
low.
60%.
Yeah.
What's the average answer phone conversion rate? have you seen?
The conversions off of the calls coming in. That based on the data we have here, it's around like 70%.
Okay. All right,
Yeah,
awesome. 70%. And I know that
you know these
the
numbers, yeah.
for amount that I've seen, gosh, I just I just acquired an office, and I saw what this doctor's been doing. She was literally doing about, and this might be generous, $1,200 per plan. Okay. I mean, and so then let's say, what's her acceptance? What's the average acceptance for a doctor? I actually think it's 15% is the average. 15% acceptance. And let's say that I'm going to go assume they can at least do it. Let's say clinically they're awesome and they can do everything they do.
Procedure, yeah.
And I'm going to assume that it's 100% collections. Let's just assume that. So you spend $3,000 to go ahead and market to get patients in. Does that make sense? I spent $3,000 only to collect or only to produce $3,954 after everything is done because because at each step you're just not doing as you're missing out on so much efficiency. So
Mm-hmm.
let's go here and now look. Now I want you guys, you remember 3,954. So it's a $954 spread here. And so any doctor that sees that is going to go ahead and say, my marketing do crap.
Right.
I only made $3,000 on these new patients. It sucks. So let's go ahead and start going in there. Instead of adjusting marketing spend, let's just say team is on it and they answer 95%. What happens? Suddenly it
Mm-hmm.
goes to $1,520, right? Let's say something from phone conversion. Your team gets up to 85%. Suddenly it's $6,708. Let's say the doctor now is doing comprehensive treatment planning instead of just emergency treatment planning or they're doing the whole thing. They're analyzing everything, right? They're making sure they're treatment plan like a prosthodontist is the way I tell my doctors. You want a treatment plan like a prosthodontist. Let's say they just do $3,500 on average per exam. Look at the difference. It's like
Wow.
almost $20,000. Let's say they get their treatment acceptance up to 30%, $40,000.
Mm-hmm.
So that's really the power of knowing how efficient are you. These are efficiency steps. And now when you have all that, all the things, all these are in line. Now guess what? What happens when you start to increase marketing spend? Huge difference. I doubled marketing spend. I suddenly doubled production.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to add on to this. This is actually so you validate some of the numbers that we talk about. So when the practice isn't performing the best, for every dollar they spend, they're getting about $1.25 back. Just by changing the answer rate, they went to $2.25 back. But then where the real magic starts is when you start to be able to put it all together and you're returning a $7 return, or even at a $13 return off of $1. So I get asked a lot, like, what should I expect from a one doctor location? Well, it's usually like $3 to $6 in return. And that's normal. The
Mhm.
great doctors will get a $7 to $10 for one doctor, and I have doctors that are getting $10 to $15 off of every dollar they spend. And so this tells you that if you are the best of the best, and when we put that up, you're getting $13 for every dollar you spend. That's possible. But even if you are in the average and you're getting $6 back, that's a great return. And this shows you this goes back to it's basically the value chain of KPIs of what
Mm-hmm.
happens if one of them
Right.
breaks.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. It's just makes it very clear that if you're not if you are missing any of these, if you're not high on efficiency in any of these steps, you're missing out on a lot and you're wasting marketing dollars.
Yeah, because it's a misconception that you can fix problems by throwing money at it. And this just proves that that theory is incorrect.
I mean,
Yeah.
you can hide it, and I think Ryan alluded to that. It's like you can
Mhm.
hide a lot of things with more new patients,
Right.
but you're just being very inefficient. I mean, if we go back to what we originally had, 50%, and was it phone conversions are 70%? and average doctors produce treatment plans about 1,500, and they're getting about 15% case acceptance. You can see that the same. Another this office could go ahead and spend $3,000, and they're just not there. They're wondering, why is this not working, right?
Hmm.
And for a marketing company, I know it's hard because they want to go ahead and put it all the accountability on. It's like the marketing is not working,
Yeah.
Yeah.
but
Brian, what are you doing?
does include this entire process or this entire all these steps that really result in what your ROI is going to be on your new patient revenue. So
Yeah.
it's I think it's eye-opening, and it really makes a good argument that even if you're helping a company market, it's like, well, what's your answer rate? What's your phone conversion rate?
Mm-hmm.
How much are you treatment
Yeah.
planning per exam? What do you what how much is being accepted?
Right.
Because and I'm sure a lot of times you could be looking at numbers like I guess it's great when you go ahead and just say, well, you're getting a whole bunch of patients in.
Mm-hmm.
But when it comes to measuring the ROI, it's like it depends on how efficient the back team is at converting all this. So
Yeah.
Yeah. And this is pure gold. I love this. I think I'm going to ask a question too. How have you, a lot of people say when you get to this point, you're like, wow, this is amazing. This is way over my head. You didn't start here years ago when you opened the practices. Even when we worked together, your metrics had advanced tremendously. How did you start and how did you get to this point? And maybe get some advice on that process.
how did I start? I
Yeah.
started with knowing nothing about running a business, and
Mhm.
I I actually fell into it just because out of desperation. I had a lot of failed associateships, and I got to this point where I was a month away from not being able to pay our bills, and I had the opportunity. This opportunity fell in my lap to go ahead and purchase practice, and I looked at it. I seriously looked at it like this. I was like, all right, well, we can always let's go ahead and let's take this risk, because I looked at the worst case scenario was that I would have to move in with my wife's parents,
Mhm.
and we'd still have a roof over our head. And it was like, all right, let's just go ahead and do it. And it would be very humbling if that hadn't happened. But we took the chance. And when I first stepped in the office, I was very reliant on the team members that were already there.
Right.
I mean, I didn't know how AR worked or anything at all. I knew how to do dentistry. That's it. So a lot of these metrics came about just from the need to understand
Mm-hmm.
what the key uh, what do we have to focus on? I mean, like I said, if we're going to go ahead, I'm a big problem solver. So it just started off with saying, well, what's our problem? If we're not able, working backwards, like if we're not producing enough,
Mm-hmm.
well, what leads to production, and then just
Right.
working backwards and just kind of picking it apart. In just over many years, I've been doing this for a while, and so it just continued to develop, because you're just always asking, well, what impacts that? What impacts that? And it just grew and grew. I mean, you should see the actual metrics I have our office managers and our fill out. It's very, very intimidating to go ahead and look at when you first see it, but it's so informative for those that like Danya who have been using it for a while. I mean, every number is like, well, I don't want to lose that number because it tells me what's going on here.
Tells the story. Yeah.
I love the idea of like there's some companies that try to minimize what you track in terms of the number of metrics. I think there's one company, I don't know if I won't mention them, but they send you an email with a summary of all your numbers, and that's it. And that might be suitable for something where you just want to get a pulse of, are we are we good? Or are we not good? But
Mm-hmm.
that's not enough what I found, that's not enough to go ahead and really drive the business. If you're getting an email, that's like having a GPS that updates, every hour. I mean, you're going to make a wrong turn and you're going to be in the wrong place, but all it's going to tell you is you're in the wrong place and you got to turn around. And that's not good enough. What I found over time is that, yeah, it's very, very important for us to go ahead and know exactly where we're at. And so that entails a lot of numbers for, each person on our team has KPIs, anywhere between 1 to 3, sometimes 4 KPIs. And it's very important for them to know exactly where they're at. I think Danya alluded to that. One of our accountability systems, because we have SOPs, but we also have accountability systems because accountability systems make sure people are doing the SOPs, right?
Right.
And so the accountability system is that they input their own metrics. Do we take those metrics and no, we have we use practice by numbers. We go into open dental, we get those numbers directly, but the update of those numbers is takes so long that it's not going to go ahead and give the feedback. It's not going to give the immediate feedback for someone to make a course correction. Does that make sense? So, like a hygienist, if we only showed them their metrics, at the end of the week or even once a month, that's too late. That's like telling you, oh, you didn't make it. Okay, well, that's a bummer.
Mhm.
You didn't do it. Whereas what we have now, which Danya was talking about, is that they enter their own numbers throughout the day. And when they enter those numbers, so we have a spreadsheet that they enter numbers and immediately gives them the feedback of where they're at in terms of in a letter score format. They know, the moment they start entering it, it auto calculates their grade for the day. And so as they put those numbers in, they know, oh, am I a B? Am I at A? Am I a C? Or am I an F? And that kind of immediate feedback is really important in the way we run everything. Is just because, I'm a big believer that the sooner you get feedback, the sooner that you can go ahead and fix what it is. And
Right.
the immediacy of that's going to go ahead and help make sure that we stay on course. So by the end of the month, we're more likely to be on target rather than find that we're way off. So anyway, I'm sorry. I kind of went on a
No,
long,
that
but it's
was good.
I'm a big believer in immediacy of feedback or some sort of KPI for each team member so they know, am I on track or I'm not on track?
Hmm.
Yeah. I think that was a good, no, I mean, I think that illustrates kind of the point of what we're looking at here and what you do is, and again, taking away from if you're a small office, you got to start somewhere to get to this point.
Right.
You always build, and I thought of something while you were talking, Dr. Lee, that for 5 years we've worked together is this. It's a Ted Lasso. I love Ted Lasso. And I got a book right here called "Lead It Like Lasso" that I keep on my desk. I keep books that inspire me on my desk to look
Yeah.
at. Anyway, so I do that. But one of the things that I think that came up is, I thought Dr. Lee this way is like he makes this comment where he's like, and he's in the bar playing darts, and he's like, "Be curious, not judgmental." The thing
Mhm.
that Dr. Lee's done the whole time is he asks questions. He's curious
Right.
about why things are happening, and he never really gets on somebody for judging them for what's happening. He wants to know why it's happening.
Hmm.
And I think that's an interesting way of approaching problem solving isn't by instantly saying, well, why, like, we got to get them to answer the phone. What are they doing? That's not acceptable. No, it's why aren't they answering the phone?
Hmm.
Let's dive into it and look. And so anyway, I thought through that in the conversations that we have is it's always why. Let's look into that and using numbers and using data, but then trying to get down to the point instead of just judging on why something's happening. No, be curious and explore why it's happening. And this is a perfect illustration of everything you just said. These numbers, everything is the why. Why is it happening, and then how
Right.
do you use it and how do you correct it? So
Yeah.
yeah,
I I haven't read the book, but yeah, it certainly makes a lot of sense. I mean, certainly the way I look at it, if something's not performing, it's either the wrong process or wrong person.
yeah,
Which one is it? It's interesting. There's not many when you can look at it that way. You just want to understand, well, how do we go ahead and make it as easy as possible for someone to go ahead and do the right process?
Hmm.
yeah,
When we
yeah,
do that, it all starts to come together.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I like this was good. You know. I think there's a lot to take out of it. And again, I would say take any practice owner of any size, take out of the high level pieces here of looking at numbers, making decisions, using those numbers, looking at the right numbers, um, hiring the right people is very important with all of this. And so, takeaways are everything I just said, but then also, if it's something, and I'm big on collaboration, everybody knows that. So, I would say and I talked to Dr. Lee and Danya on this, if you have questions with them, I'll put in the email here. I'll put in their contact information, reach out to them. They're great resources. It's been a great relationship with them that I've had and learned a lot of some of the things that we've done. Um, and that we share with a lot of practice we worked with came from this office here. And I think, and we didn't even touch on it too, like behind Dr. Lee there is essentially like your core values of the
Oh yeah,
practice.
yeah.
And so, those things are important. We could have gone on for like another hour, I think, on all of the things that they do. Before the call started, Dr. Lee was like, I just don't know. If what I have to share, I'm at the league of these other doctors and Donio. And I was like, no, I mean, this illustrates that you guys are at the league. And it's not about, and this is big. It's not about judging where you are, comparing yourself to other doctors. It's doing what you can do best.
Correct.
And, it doesn't matter if you're doing $1 million or $10 million. It's about doing what's right for you and your practice. And
Mhm.
so I don't care what level you're at, like you guys are at an elite level when it comes to analyzing numbers and using them to make decisions. So I really appreciate that. Any final thoughts that you have throughout?
Um,
Uh,
my final thought, because it came to me when you were saying monitoring numbers and they kind of guide you to where you need to go, but ensuring that it's accurate, right? Because if you don't
Yes.
have accurate numbers, it can actually steer you in the wrong direction.
Yeah.
So accurate data is vitally, vitally important. We've had, again, and Dr. Lee mentioned early on, we've made every mistake in the book. And so that is definitely one that we've made in the past of just, having incorrect data that steered us in the wrong direction. And we were putting our attention in the wrong area until we realized this isn't right. This isn't the right data. And when we corrected it, our attention wasn't where it needed to be. And so having accurate data is vitally important to have the right impact on your business that you want.
I like that.
Yeah.
Dr. Lee, any final thoughts?
Final thoughts, I would say for anyone wanting to go ahead and have multiple practices, just make sure number one is operating really, really well. And even number two, it's a big step. Like I said, I had a lot of certainly stumbled when going to number two. It was very, very, difficult and challenging. It costs a lot. But what I've learned along the way is that it certainly can get easier, but you have to go ahead and continue asking why is something happening, or and how can we go ahead and you know I think improve that. And a lot of obstacles, a lot of challenges, and the goal is really to go ahead and solve for those. I think one of the challenges that we're looking at is like, well, how can we go ahead and continue to increase our impact and productivity in our practices. And one of the things is like, oh well, what about adding to the weekends? And the first thing I think a lot of people think is like, well, gosh, weekends, no one wants to work weekends.
You
And
don't say the S word.
um but it's just a challenge. It's another challenge that you got to say, can we solve for this? What can we do to go ahead and make it palatable or attractive or incentivize people to go ahead and make that happen? I think the same could be said for if you have an office that's in a more rural area. Or well, I know most DSOs are like, oh, that's not going to fly. That's not going to fly because we're not going to be able to get doctors there. But at the same time, I'm sure you know countless people who have practices in more rural areas. I think I think Tenuri is actually in a more rural area of New York. But without with that saying, with but you just have to find ways to go ahead and overcome those challenges instead of saying, ah, well, that's just not going to happen because this. And I think that's what really helps, produce a lot of success in people who are great entrepreneurs or great business owners. They're also they look at challenges as well. I guess like that book, The Obstacle is the Way. Was it? It's that's where where that's where the I guess the productivity, the money, and the growth is to go ahead and overcome those challenges.
Correct. Yeah.
What stops other people from continuing on? That's where you really make headway. So that's
Yeah.
what I would say.
I love that. I love that closing. I think that sums up a little bit of everything we said. So I appreciate both of you coming on
Yeah.
today, and thank you. And again, I'm going to include their information. I would really recommend if you have any questions on anything they showed or anything else, I'm reaching out to them. They're a wealth of knowledge. Been one of the first, I think, three practices I started working with, or
Mhm.
four. I think the first three. And so a lot of what I've learned and done is based on a lot of what they have been doing. And so I appreciate that. So thank you
Yeah.
so much for coming
Yeah.
on today.
Thank you, Ryan. It's been a pleasure.
Right.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. It's been wonderful working with you as well. I mean, like I said,
Yeah.
you've helped us out a ton, and hey, we've been with you for, is it now 5 years? Yeah,
Yeah, a
five
little over
years.
five. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It's
Crazy.
been great with you, and just seeing you grow too. I mean,
Yeah.
like I said, you just used to be you by yourself, and now
I
you
know.
got.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's funny. So, well, thank you.
Yeah.
All
Thank
right.
you, Ryan. Take care.
Thank you, Ryan.